Okay, so here is the first video of the writing task 1 of the IELTS writing test. Okay, here is the first script for the task 1 writing. Before we look at the script itself, let's check out the word count. The word count comes in at 192 words. A little bit too lengthy for task 1 writing. Let's go on to look at the script. Of course, first of all, the overview. Is a clear overview presented. Here the writer gives us an overview of the first graph. Although there is an analysis that uses the word decrease, that's not really necessary. You don't need to analyze the data in your overview. You just need to say what the chart is describing. Trends don't go in the overview. Trends go in the analysis, which would be your second, third paragraph. And then the second graph is given an overview here. I'm not sure why the writer has decided to split the overview in two. It would be better to give an overview of both graphs right in the beginning instead of doing this. And again, here in the overview of the second graph, they give analysis. That's not necessary. Don't analyze the numbers in your overview. Now, if you look at the graph itself, well, the most obvious features are that these blue bars are decreasing, the red ones are increasing, and when we look at the second one, we have this V shape, bottoms in the middle. These are the major trends, because if you look at what the prompt usually says, it says summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Well, the main features are what we see here, represented by these black lines. Those are the main trends. Okay, so let's see what the writer did. Okay, we have numbers, percentages to describe the information that's given on the axis here. Now the writer chooses to use percentages. Probably a good guess, because this chart is not that great, because they don't tell us what the unit here is. It's probably a percentage. They should have done a better job of telling us exactly what the units are, though. Otherwise, we run the risk of describing the data incorrectly. Now, they don't tell us if this is the biggest number. It just says nearly 80% of students under 26 years old. This is the biggest. Well, of course, we can see it's the biggest, but just by reading the script, we don't know if this is a maximum and whether this is a minimum. We just know that there's a decline, but it's not clearly stated if this is the maximum, if this 80% is the maximum, and whether this 48% is the, this 18% is the minimum. So if you're going to be describing the data, be sure to indicate whether this is a maximum and this is a minimum. Okay, so second paragraph. Well, we have this phrase, there's only 10%. But again, is this minimum? Okay, that seems to be a problem. Okay, we can see there's an increase. Okay, it goes up. and then another dramatic increase. Is this a maximum? It's not clear to me. Okay, now when we get to this second chart, we start to see the word maximum. It's much better. And then we see 32, but there's no mention whether that is a minimum or not. So be sure to indicate minimums and maximums on your chart. Then we have this last sentence here. It's unclear whether employer support is only for career-focused study, but the highest level is for those students who mainly study for career purposes. This is some sort of summary. If you look at the last sentence, the last part of the sentence, but the highest level for those students is for those students who mainly study for career purposes. In a piece of writing that's only 150 words long, we don't have time for summaries. That maybe partly explains the word count of 192 words. This could be one reason why the writer went over the minimum requirement for the word count. And this first half of the sentence is unclear whether employer support is only for career-focused study. How is that relevant to the chart? Okay, I'm not sure why that was included. Let's see, task achievements. How well does this do? Well, we can't say there's no overview, because obviously there is. So, presents an overview with information appropriately selected. Well, I'd say so. They selected all the information that described the major trends. Let's see if they could get a 7. Covers the requirements of chance. Overview of main trends, differences in stages. If we just go according to this, the information we have here, it's possible that it could get a 7, but possibly just a 6. Now let's move on to coherence and cohesion. Let's see here. Here we have some referencing. This percentage. Here we have conversely. Here we have, again, contrast being shown. Here we have some referencing with it. Okay, so not bad. Definitely not a 5, because there is definitely progression and substitution happens all the time. Well, we can't say that the cohesive devices are used mechanically. We can say that referencing is not always done appropriately. So possibly a 7 for coherence and cohesion. Now, if we move on to vocabulary, the lexical resources, one thing that's a problem is the abbreviations. Why is here abbreviated? I don't know, and I see this everywhere. Don't abbreviate. That's a problem. Okay, so we have this phrase late adulthood. Late adulthood is used to describe the over 49 group. I'm not sure why the writer chooses this phrase. Because if you're over 49, you're in your 50s. So why not just use the term in your 50s, the people in their 50s, or the over 49 group, something like that, late adulthood. Here we have stemming. That's a good word to use. Here we see this late adulthood again. And this phrase, the third decade of life. Instead of saying that, I would say in their 30s. Okay, so for vocabulary, possibly a 6. Let's have a look at 7. Less common lexical items. Well, you know, when you're describing data, it's difficult to use words that can be described as we see here, less common lexical items. Because there are standard words that we always use. That's one of the reasons why the writer probably included this last sentence. Because if you're commenting on the chart or the data, it's much easier to use some words that can be considered less common. I don't think that they did a good job here. So overall, 7, I wouldn't say so. Probably a 6. And if we move on to look at the grammar, well, we see some standard phrases, but it's used accurately. Declines by a certain percentage. If you look at this sentence, only 40% of 40 to 49-year-olds and 18% of over 49-year-olds studying for career reasons in late adulthood. Now, I don't know if studying here is used as a noun or a verb. If it's used as a verb, the be verb seems to be missing. If it's used as a noun, I don't know what the verb is. There's no verb. So it seems to be a mistake here. From interest with age. This one increases slowly till, until would have been better than till here. The beginning of the 4th decade. Increases dramatically, so with phrases like this, they're pretty standard. Nothing outstanding. Support is maximum. Support is maximum. Support is at its maximum. There's a word missing here, at. The third active life increases in late adulthood. So we have pretty standard phrases. Decline, increases, increases, drops rapidly. Probably 6 would be a fair assessment. Okay, here's our second script. Let's get into the overview first. Okay, so the writer gives us an overview of the first chart right in the beginning, and then overview of the table down here. So there's some paraphrasing happening here. Global water use, and here we have amount of water used worldwide. I don't see the word sector being used here in the overview. But okay, let's see if they identify the major trends. So we have agriculture, industrial use, domestic use. They're both in an uptrend. Let's see. Throughout the century, the largest quantity of water was used for agricultural purposes. Well, that's true. That's a major trend. It's always been the maximum. So yes. And this increased dramatically from about 500 cubic kilometers to around 3,000 cubic kilometers in the year 2000. So the 3,000 refers to the year 2000. The 500 refers to, I don't know, they don't give us the date. So the writer really should have said that this 500 cubic kilometers was used in 1900. So the date's missing from this. If you're going to give numbers, please be sure to give all the numbers. Like here, 3,000 corresponds with 3,000 corresponds with the year 2000, but 500 has no corresponding date. Also, increased consumption was minimal until mid-century. Minimal, okay, but what is the actual number? No numbers given. Here we have 1,000, 300, and the writer says that both of these are far below the levels used for agriculture. Okay, then moving on to the table, we see 3 things that are mentioned. Population, irrigated land, water consumption. Now, irrigated land is mentioned. Water consumption per person is mentioned. I don't see anything about population. That's a problem. Population of 176 million. It's given here at the end. This last sentence, with a population of 176 million, the figures for Brazil indicate how high agriculture water consumption can be in some countries. It attempts to be some kind of overview, but it doesn't really give us any real-life information. This is too obvious, how high agriculture water consumption can be in some countries. If you're going to include your own thoughts at the end, the reason for including your own thoughts is so you can use some high-level vocabulary. But this isn't done here. The figures for Brazil indicate none of these words here are particularly, let's pull up the vocabulary here. None of them are particularly less common. So why include very obvious information? It's just irrelevant. Actually, this is not really information. These are your own thoughts. But why include this if you're not going to be using some, let's say, less common vocabulary? So, problem is population for the DRC is not mentioned. This date is missing, and this number, minimal, the word minimal, this description has no data. And that can be a problem because there may be no data to support the description. Now here, it only happened twice that no data was given. Well, actually only once. The description here is the word minimal, but no data is given. It only happened once. But you run the danger of getting a 5 for your task achievement if you don't give data to support your description. So let's see if the writer can get a 6 for task achievement. Addresses the requirements of the task. I would say in general the information was appropriately selected, even though there were some minor slips, so probably a 6. Let's go on to look at coherence and cohesion. Okay, so throughout the century, that's good. Here we have also, but from 1950 onwards. Contrasting. This means there's some referencing going on, and this is reflected. Okay, so very easy to understand. If we look at the band descriptors, information is organized logically, and there is progression. Is a range of cohesive devices appropriately used? Can we describe this as a range? Well, of course, in task 1, it can be more difficult to use a range of cohesive devices, just simply because of the format of the question, the format of the task, rather. So this script could get a 7 for that. And if we look at vocabulary, agricultural purposes, instead of saying agricultural sector, so that's good. And then here we have industrial and domestic sectors. It can be difficult to paraphrase industrial and domestic, so it's fine to use the same words. We have the word consumption, and we have the word minimal, that's good. The table illustrates the differences. And this is reflected in the figures. Okay, so that's a good phrase to use. See very few errors. So, because it's relatively error-free, it would be difficult to give this person a 6. Because there aren't really inaccuracies. So the range would be sufficient to give this person a 7 for vocabulary. And if you look at the grammar being used, a large quantity of water was used, so we have this passive structure. This increased dramatically. Past tense. The water used in another passive structure. Past tense. Rose. Past tense again. It's too bad we don't see any past perfect structures being used. Okay, so here present tense, just as here, present tense in our overview. Is used. Because there were no dates here. So the writer correctly uses present tense in this table. Here the past tense was used because we have these dates here. Here there's no date, so we're going to be using the present tense to talk about the numbers. So for grammar, 6 is probably not just justified. Uses a variety of complex structures. I would have liked to see not just the present and past tense used, but because there are so few errors, probably a 7 for grammar as well.